and welcome to the Nighthawk Racing and F1-RSD Championship. Firstly, I'm Midnight. You can see myself and the rest of our other drivers here on our Nighthawk Racing YouTube, where you can check out the entire back catalogue of seasons 1 to 3 of the F1-RSD series. Also, our mini-series and all one-off race events, all of which are highly competitive and lots of fun. Please check out our Instagram and TikTok for other content and races too. Link in the description or scan the QR dot for more information. But now, let's focus on the event at hand. So tonight is Season 4, Round 6, Blue Lobby, Deep Forest Reverse. So a little more information on the championship. There are 10 events that you can see on our calendar in front of you now, which are divided up into red and blue lobbies. There are 2 racing events with a qualifying session for the big feature race itself. The sprint race tonight is 10 laps and at 85% fuel. The grid is formed via how drivers line up in reverse average points scored across the season. The feature race is 37 laps. All drivers must use 2 different tyre compounds while starting on the same compound they set their fastest lap in the qualified session just before. As a reminder, the blue lobby has all driver aids switched on, such as traction control, ASM and ABS, whereas the red lobby has all of these disabled with the exception of ABS for that true hardcore driving experience to really challenge our drivers.
Right, so while the drivers are getting to know Deep Forest, let's get to know Deep Forest as well and see if we can find a few facts about it. But Deep Forest Raceway is a fictional circuit that first appeared in the original Gran Turismo, if you had the pleasure of playing it. It's also featured in most of the games since, except GT Sport, but it has returned to GT7 with a slightly redesigned layout. It's 4.25 kilometers long, or just over 2.5 miles. And it is set in Switzerland. Obviously, it's known for its kind of thickly wooden forest around the track, with that back straight literally on the cliff edge. And like many original circuits, it incorporates several tunnels due to the high-speed nature of the track. Sports cars focusing on raw power are best suited for this course. So I think the NHR drivers will fit in right at home. But it features undulating corners, tight banked corners and long sweeping turns. It's a medium to high speed course, this one, and it is a favourite among GT players, not just for its scenery but for its deceptive difficulty to drive quickly. And obviously this is the first of 2. We're back at Deep Forest next week for the reverse layout, so let's see how the drivers got on. But before I hand you back over to the drivers to see how they got on in the sprint race, in the Gran Turismo, the track, like I say, was given an extreme redesign, with more barriers being added around the racetrack within the forested road. The most significant change is the addition of a much longer straight from the tunnel section, leading into a sharp downhill hairpin turn, which does catch quite a few drivers out. But let's go see how the drivers got on in qualifying and get into the sprint race.
And here we are for the sprint grid for Round 6 Deep Forest Reverse, giving our drivers something interesting to try after last week's race at the standard layout. So, taking up pole position today in that M6, our very own co-creator of Nighthawk Racing, Sarah Hawkey, in that blue and red livery. Going to try and maximise whatever she can out of that pole position here today. In P2 we have big, crazy Bertie, who is in that Mclaren 650S, and he's definitely going to be wanting a good result also. But possibly our favourite for the event today, Coach from Pursuit Racing in that Supra. We know both Coach and that Supra are very fast at the moment, so good luck to him here today. In P4 we have Lee in that BTCC livery, who has always been one of our sprint race merchants, so we're going to definitely see what he can accomplish today. And in P5 in that Lexus Italy, who today in the blue lobby is going to be trying to get the most points he can, and he's had a hard time of the last race or so, but today hopefully that will turn around and he can get some good points on the board. And Sarah, can you take the next few from me?
Of course I can. So in P6 we have T50 Phil in that Nissan GTR. In P7 we have Koulios sporting a new livery this week, Spoon Sport livery. Some may know, obviously very iconic livery, and I'm sure obviously that bright yellow and blue will be able to see it from space. But in P8, starting just behind Koulios, we have Murph in that Toyota Supra. In P9 we have a new joiner to the Nighthawk Racing grid, is Nigel Mansell in that Ferrari 458. And in P10 another new joiner to the grid, we have T50 Gary in that other Nissan GTR, so team me up with his other T50 buddy, and hopefully the GTR's doing well tonight. But in P11 he's back on the grid, we have Iceman in that Genesis. And then again, obviously, we don't see him very often, but I think he's ready to fight tonight, pick up some points, and enjoy the race as normal. But that's the grid midnight. An interesting grid, to say the least, and obviously some new faces. Let's see how they get on.
Yeah, quite right, Sarah. That's going to be a very interesting grid. A couple of drivers to certainly keep your eyes on. Particularly at the moment, we know those Supras are very, very quick, but keep an eye out for those GTRs as well. And a potential dark horse today in the very, very brightly coloured NSX Koulios. So this could be a fun one to look forward to. Let's get to the track, shall we? Okay, here we go for the 6th round of Season 4 of F1 RSC, this time in the blue lobby. Sarah Hawkey leads us away, followed by Bertie, Coach, Lee, Cicely, Phil, Koulios, Murphy, Nigel Mansell, Gary and Iceman. So into the first corner we go. Sarah leading the pack away in that BMW M6. So far, all single file as they head round the first corner. It's going to get really tight when it comes into the first left-hander, followed by the hairpin. Matt, this is going to be a tight one, but as you can see, they're all starting to bunch up. We're going to start seeing some moves here. Cicely coming to the right, challenging Lee. Lee keeping the position so far. And it looks like we might be seeing, I think that is Phil. Yep, having a spin coming out of the hairpin. So that's damage, but this is the sprint, so that will repair itself. But we head off back down the main straight. Coach is up to P2. Bertie still holding P3, followed by Lee. Matt, have you seen anything yet?
Apart from that crash in turn 1, not necessarily. Looks like was fairly clean up at the front until there was a bit of a collision in the back. But we saw all the drivers taking fairly uniform line, except for Lee, who took that inside line into that first harsh braking zone defending position. Will be interesting to see how many overtakes we get to witness into that corner. We see there a battle between Bertie and Koulios heading into the tunnel now. The Honda NSX on the inside, just keeping that position for now, but Bertie will have the advantage into the right-hander. Bit of contact, but Koulios managing to stay ahead of the McLaren driver. So good overtake there for Koulios, managing to get by, and Sitterly will now be putting pressure on Bertie as Bertie heads for that narrow inside acute angle into that corner to defend position. We see someone there, I think it might be Sitterly, kicking up with the grass on the exit, not going to help his exit speed heading onto this long straight, with Gary behind with a 1 second penalty. So Sitterly might be okay with that mistake, since he'll have to serve that penalty as we head out of that first harsh braking zone of, well, turn 3 or turn 5 or turn 1, whatever you want to call it, because GT7 track maps don't really like deciding.
Quite right. Apparently this hairpin, which is widely considered maybe the second or third corner, depending on how you look at it, is actually corner 5 on GT7 maps. But let's move back to the racing. Bertie has fallen back from his P2 to P5 now. Sarah still holding the lead, followed by Coach in that Supra, which is wickedly fast around here. Lee still holding P3, followed by Koulios. So it looks like it's started to settle down at the front a little bit. We did see Sitterly come out that final corner basically completely sideways, but has held on to it. One of our new stars, Nigel Mansell, love the name, is in P7 in that Ferrari 458, followed by Murph, Gary and Phil recovering with Iceman at the back at the moment. But, oh, just catching Sarah coming sideways out of the right handle there, but holding it together. It's going to have coach for company down the main straight and into, well, at the final corner, I feel, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to see how good of an exit coach managed to get in that Supra. We know that Supra has been wicked quick around both the deep forest layouts. So we'll see now coach on this straight in the slipstream of Sarah as they're about to head into the series of long right hand corners. Coach heads for that outside line, which will of course be the outside line for the sharp right hander in a second. You can see kicking a bit of grass there as he cuts the curb, but manages to get ahead even before the braking zone, ahead of the M6 driver. Just to point out as well, I believe Gary dropped down to P10 after serving that, P8 after serving that penalty. It was P9, but now is going to stay in P9 as I believe Murph overtaking into the first corner. We see Koulias just on the tail of Lee there, and Sarah still on the tail of Coach in the Supra. So we'll see if Coach can manage to defend off as we see Koulias on the outside here into the right-hander. Oh. But Lee managed to keep the position. Oh, he's gone for a slide. He just about manages to keep it straight. But a big slide there, which causes him to lose a few positions, which causes Bernie to have a bit of contact on Bernie's round. And we've contact with Sir Lee here now as they just head into the series of S's. Bit of a confusing incident there, Midnight.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Koulias clearly lit up the rear tyres coming out of that right-hander whilst challenging Lee, and then unfortunately it looks like he's veered across the track, catching Bertie unawares, and then with a little bit of contact perhaps over the grass, Bertie's ended up sideways backwards and with some damage. Unfortunate timing for Bertie there, but this is racing, this does happen. You can see a lot of the cars lighting up those rear tyres with people just trying to get on the back of the car in front, which now Koulias is attempting to do on Nigel down into turn 1. Yeah, these incidents do happen, but that may well be a stewarding investigation after the race, mate. One of our favourites.
Yeah, we'll just have to see once the final verdict comes out as we head into turn 1 now. Koulias on the outside manages to get back ahead of the Ferrari 458 driver. And now we see just pulling away. Good exit there. Certainly serves the penalty, and so does Iceman in the back. So certainly we'll have a change position here as Gary managed to get alongside him on the straight.
Yep, Gary
certainly not having good acceleration.
Sorry, yeah, Matt, is Gary in his
first
of
course,
race
Gary doing an excellent job in P7 there now in the GTR. So good job from Gary. Of course, got that penalty early on in the race, but recovering well up past Sitterly once Sitterly, of course, served his own penalty. Nigel's still on the back of Koulias in P5, not managing to get the position as of right now. We'll have to see out of the exit of this final corner if he's going to be able to gain some ground. But you see the Honda NSX driver doing pretty well in P4 after having that skirmish.
Yeah, and Koulias running a special one-off livery today in the blue and yellow this time, different from his normal aqua and purple colours. Interesting to see, and he's making a highlight of himself today. But out the front at the moment, we do have Coach who's starting to pull a lead from Sarah as things have settled down out front. Sarah in that M6, now looking like she might be coming under pressure from Lee in that 911. As we know, generally has quite a good strike rate for podiums in the sprint races. But it does look like behind, Koulias hasn't had the greatest of first sectors. Nigel looks like he might just be closing in on the young Brit.
Yeah, and in the back as well, I believe we've had a bit of a swap position. We've seen Sitterly and Phil fighting side by side on the straight, and Phil just pulling back into the slipstream, but is now going for a move into this right-hander down the inside on the Lexus driver. I believe one of the only Lexus drivers on the grid this season. I don't know if anybody else is running that Lexus, but doing a good job. We love to see a variety of car manufacturers. Of course, we've got the Ferrari 458 of Nigel. We've got, of course, the Genesis there that Iceman is running, I believe. So good variety of cars. Honda NSX for Koulias, of course, as well. I was considering running that car for this season until I finally decided on the Ferrari 458 just for a bit of a challenge.
I'd say that was a good idea, Matt, because both of those cars, the NSX and the 458, seem to be, I'm going to say roughly equal on track, but it definitely gives us good battles regardless. Both of them entertaining and fun cars to drive.
Yeah, definitely. As we see now, the two T50 lads going side by side now, heading into the left-hander. Of course, both of them in GTRs, and Phil managing to get ahead of Gary as Murph went a bit deep, I think, into turn one, and Phil just catching the rear right quarter panel of Murph out of the exit of that corner, so it caused him to check up, and now Gary is back side by side onto the straight, but Phil just managing to keep ahead for now.
Worth to note, both the GTR drivers are on the soft tyre for the sprint, and they might just about make the end, but those tyres are going to be very second hand by the end. But like you said, they definitely had a bit of contact in there, and Sicily slipped up the inside of the pair of them. It looks like Phil just about avoided the barrier there, and it's put Iceman on the back of the pair of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to see if those soft tyres will make it to the end, as you mentioned, but as well, if they'll be able to fend off from Iceman and potentially Birdie behind if Birdie catches up. I think just getting a bit sideways there. Iceman behind the back of Gary, getting a bit of the dirty air heading into the S section. But let's see what exit he manages to get out of the corners. We see Koulias now on the back of Lee up at the front. The Porsche versus the Honda. Koulias could be on the inside for this corner, which will now be the outside for the left-hander. Will be inside line for the sharp right-hander. But it looks like Lee backing out of that move or something. I'm not sure what's happened there, but Nigel getting up the inside now into P4 as well. I'm not sure what really happened there, but Lee must have went off the throttle or something, or braked, and losing 2 positions there. So 2 for 1, unfortunately, for Lee. So down into P6 he goes.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. It looked like Koulias got up the inside of Lee there. Lee backed out to choose his line, and then Nigel just jumped up the inside, grabbing the place. So very opportunistic there from Nigel. And what can you say? That was a good bit of driving from all 3 drivers, all avoiding what is a very tricky sector, any form of contact whatsoever. So well done, gentlemen, there. But otherwise, we've got Murph, who is sitting in P6 at the moment. It looks like he's settled down into the race. He's with our second race with us now, and I think he's going to start moving towards the front. It looks like he's going to be bringing Sicily, Phil, and we do have Iceman now on P9. Gary's fallen to the back of that pack, but it looks like the whole pack are coming with the Irish driver, Murphy, towards the front.
Yeah, we've seen some pace out of certain cars this weekend as Koulias now side by side with Sarah. This is going to be an interesting battle. The M6 versus the NSX side by side as they head up this weaving sector of Sector
Nigel.
1.
He's going to do the same thing
Loads
again.
of lefts and rights. Nigel tries up the inside there, but just doesn't have the late braking to get alongside Sarah fully and get that exit out of the corner, so we'll stay in P4 for now. But Sarah has conceded that position to Koulias, so Koulias gets up in a second, and Nigel in the 458 hunting down the M6 behind, and maybe might be able to get past Koulias. But Sarah down the inside now into this right-hander, not managing to make the move stick. We'll have to see. This battle is heating up here as we get into the final 4 laps of this race.
Oh, Nigel almost using Koulias as a blocker to move forwards and steal 2 places in 2 laps. Didn't quite pay off for him that time. But Koulias and Sarah having a great battle there. Historically speaking, those 2 often come to blows, which can be quite entertaining. But they have gotten round the track in beautiful fashion, but that has left Koulias running in P2 with a nice clear gap. Looks like he's building a gap now. Followed by Sarah and Nigel right on the back of Sarah, followed by Lee. So the battle for the podium is nowhere near over, Mac, but the rest of the field look like they're starting to space out a little bit. With Bertie, who has come in, I imagine that's either a retirement or he's going to be switching to soft tyres, thinking about the fastest lap point.
I think Sarah and Nigel might be side by side here. Sarah managing to stay ahead going into the left-hander, but now Nigel diving down the inside just like he did earlier in the race, but again, not getting the exit. We know that Ferrari 458 has good exits out of the corners. Not the best straight line speed, but just too acute of an angle to get that run on Sarah. But now we'll have the slipstream. We'll be side by side as we are about to come up to this right-hander harsh braking zone here. So they're side by side now. It looks like Nigel will get ahead for now, but Sarah will have this whole twisty section to recuperate and try get a good exit out of the final corner onto the straight.
Good racing from the pair, but they do still have Lee for company, so they're going to have to be... Oh, Nigel's ran wide into the left hand, and Sarah's back through. Didn't see that one coming, so Sarah very opportunistic. I didn't see any contact there, but I would imagine that is Sarah being opportunistic, seeing Nigel ran a little bit wide and taking the position back. But can Nigel put the pressure back on into the final corner? No, runs a little bit wide in fact, but Lee is right with the pair of them now, so I'm going to say Nigel and Sarah are going to have to be careful. Looks like Lee is driving smart in this one and just waiting to see what these two come to, if they come to blows or not. But Nigel down the inside of turn 1 on the right-hander. Looks like he is just about taking the position there. No, still side by side. Into the left, they have to lift for the chicane. Sarah taking the proverbial lead of the battle at the moment, but Nigel, we know he's late on the brakes around here. Holds. Sarah holds him back, but has ran wide and let up the tyres a little bit. That is going to let Nigel through on the power. But, well, that was round 2. Round 3, I think, is coming right back here, Pat Max. Let's see if Sarah gets down into the right-hander.
But if you remember as well, Lee is right here behind it. That mistake from Sarah would have let Lee catch up on the corner exit, and he definitely has. You see Sarah trying down the inside here as we watch on board with Lee now. But Sarah not managing to get the move done, so they're all staying in single file for now. No change of position apart from that move by Nigel out of the first harsh braking zone, or turn 1. I'd love to keep calling it turn 1, but it's not turn 1 according to GT7. Into this left-hander and now into this lovely twisty section. Very hard to keep a nice flow into this section sometimes. If you hit the curb too aggressively, you can go sent into the Armco on the inside or outside of the track. It's a bit of a scary corner. I think it's not my favorite corner or favorite section in GT7 to go through.
Murph's round.
Once you get on worn tires, it's very difficult. Oh, Murph is round in the Supra. Off the exit of the last corner, unfortunately, he's gone round. Going to miss the pit lane, of course, because we've light damage on for the sprint. But that's unfortunate. Murph was doing such a great job, thinking P6. But now just falling down in position after that spin.
That is so unfortunate. Yeah, he lit the tyres coming out of the last corner. And yeah, he has chosen, since it is basically the penultimate lap now, not to in the pits. But he may be able to recover a place or two, because a couple of the drivers in front, like Phil and Gary, are running those soft tyres. They're about on those last legs, so it won't be all completely lost for him. But the soft tyre runners are going to start suffering now. But that was a great battle we saw out front, which I don't think is even over yet between Nigel and Sarah, with Lee in tow. But like you say, coming through this tight section round here, if you hit a curb, you can be very easily yeeted into a barrier. But that said, the dirty air around here as well is also such a pain. You can just understeer so easily. So it's a very challenging track, this reverse track of Deep Forest. But it's given us a lot of thrills and spills so far, but I don't think we're quite over. We're going to see Murphy trying to recover at least a position on the back of Gary, but I think we have seen Bertie retire now as coach in the leader, commanding lead, starts the final lap. Koulios running a very solid P2, recovering after an early incident with Bertie. That'd be one for the steward to deal with afterwards. And we have P3, 4 and 5 all together, Matt.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I think the grid has definitely settled down now. We had those few battles heading into the final lap, but mostly up at the front, things will be staying the same, as Murph is now managing to get ahead of Gary on those soft tires. Of course, Gary will be experiencing that wear, and you see the front left nearly fully gone, so we'll be definitely struggling with a bit of understeer heading into those sharp corners. So Murph managed to get up P9, better than nothing after that spin, of course. Managed to get up that position. We look up to the front now, where we see things staying the same. Lee catching up to the rear of Sarah a small bit, but there's not a lot of road to go. We'll have to see if Lee can manage to get a move within these last few corners, but it's a very difficult section here. There's a lot of twists and turns and barriers that come up pretty much out of nowhere. So it's very difficult to get two cars side by side for a while into there. But as we head out of the final corner now, it will be Coach finishing in P1 in the Supra, in the sprint race here at Deep Forest Reverse. And Koulias, with a bit of a gap ahead of him, to the first place driver coming home in second. Nigel will come home in P3 in the Ferrari 458. Very good race from him with some very good moves. Sarah in P4 and Lee in P5. Certainly, really good race in Lexus in P6 if you want to go through the rest of the grid, Midnight.
Yeah, Iceman taking a well-deserved P7 and keeping his head down all race and just work his way up through the pack. Phil on those soft tyres making it work in P8. Murphy recovering to P9, taking Gary on the final lap. And with Bertie in P11 unfortunately retiring, probably finding himself too far behind the pack after that incident and choosing to sit out the rest of the race, having to retire. But that was, I think, quite an interesting one for this reverse layout. Coach, once he got up into the lead, just settled down and went, using the power of that Supra, getting the fastest lap and doing exactly what he needed to do today. And I would say it's a good recovery from Koulias after that incident earlier on, but he will be being looked at by the stewards. And the rest of the pack, I think they've all had good race one way or another. Nigel, great to see in his first race taking that P3. Sarah having probably the race of her season so far in P4, and yeah, down to Lee having very, very solid one. P5 was Lee P6 again. So Matt, that was entertaining. What did you think?
Yeah, I think very, very commanding lead from Coach since the start. It was a very good race from him, and I know Coach especially has had some great performances in these sprint races. Koulias as well, very good job, nice clean race for him in the NSX in P2. And I think it's interesting to see what drivers have the pace here at Deep Forest, but of course, coming to that feature race, it's not just about the outright pace. You gotta have a strategy, and you gotta have the car that will last the distance.
Quite right, and the first thing with strategy starts with qualifying. So we're going to go and have a look, see what happened in qualifying and what tyres the drivers will start their first feature race on tonight, and see where the whole feature race goes. It's going to be a 46 lap race to look forward to. So without further ado, just going to see what happened in qualifying.
So here are the qualifying results from Deep Forest Reverse, and in pole position, maybe it might be because of his livery or just that he's quite fast around here, it's Koulias with a 125.923, and starting just behind him P2 we have T50 Phil for 126.026, and he's back on the grid and back with a vengeance. That Iceman in the Genesis sitting at a 126.051, a very fast time, and I'm sure obviously, like I said earlier, Iceman really looking to capitalise on that P3. P4 we have Murph with a 126.438, and then starting just behind we have the other T50, half of T50 in Gary with a 126.728, and interesting, obviously the top 5 are qualifying on the soft tyres, Midnight. And before I pass back over to you, we then have Nigel Mansnell, love that name, with a 126.767. So he's positioned himself quite well for his first ever Nighthawk feature race. But if you could run through the rest of the grid for me, Midnight.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and I will take it from there. So in P7 we have Coach, who's also on those medium tyres, so lining up across from Nigel Mansnell. Both of those drivers looking like they're going to be a threat today. In P8 we have Lee in that 911 on the soft tyres on a 126.881. In P9 we have our very own Sarah Hawkey, also on the soft tyres, so it's going to be rapid at the start on a 127.461. And in P10 we have big crazy Bertie on a 127.630 on those medium tyres also, and joining him also on the medium tyres in P11 Sitley on a 127.902. Now Sarah, this has been a qualifying session where there's not been a big gap over the entire field, so I think it's going to be quite close, quite interesting for the race. A lot of strategies are going to play out, and we're going to have to keep an eye on particularly those top three qualifying just over a tenth away from, well, just covering the whole three of them, and then also keep a really close eye on Nigel Mansell, great name, and Coach, those top drivers on the medium tyres. Sarah, what are you going to be keeping an eye out for in this one?
I couldn't have put it perfectly myself, what you just said there. Obviously, I'm kind of interested, and obviously there's the top 5 qualifying on the softs, and a few people towards the back starting on the softs as well. And then everyone else on that alternative strategy starting on the mediums, looking for that longevity for their first stint, getting a little bit longer, and potentially offsetting them for the soft drivers. But yeah, I'm going to be looking at Mansell for sure, because he's kind of put himself right in the thick of it. Obviously starting on the mediums there, he's got the top 5 that are all starting on soft, so he's got a little bit of a challenge on his hands to get in or around the podium, especially in that first stint. But I'm sure that he can do it, and I'm excited to see him. But also as well, Coach, we know that Supra has been flying recently, so maybe Murph and Coach are on for a good result here, and yeah, I'm sure I'll be seeing that Supra flying past me loads of times. But apart from that, I think everyone could have a good race here, because it looks like those qualifying times are pretty close to each other.
And with that, I think it's time to hand over to the commentary team and see what happened in the actual race.
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we are now at Deep Forest for Blue Lobby feature race. We've got Coolio starting on pole with Phil lining up alongside him, filling out that first row. It's lights out, and away we go. Phil not getting the best start there in the GTR. He's immediately swarmed by the drivers behind, like Nigel and Murph. We head now down this straight and uphill now for the next section. Koulias maintaining that lead up ahead with Iceman in second, managing to jump him at the start after that poor start for Phil. We're heading now into the first corner. A bit of smoke there, I think, a bit of contact. We see some cars rubber banding back and forth. I think Sarah and Citterly potentially having contact there at the start. We head now down this main straight. Many drivers side by side. I think that might be Phil and Sarah side by side as we head now down this long straight before we head into this right-hander. It's still Koulias in first with Iceman second. Drivers moving around, squabbling for position, but no real change of position heading into that corner, although we've got Sarah and Phil side by side now heading out of that right-hander. Interesting first lap there, midnight. Few changes of position and a few poor starts from some drivers.
Yeah, not quite sure where to go with some of that, but I did spot that Sarah has picked up front end damage, and it's Gary with rear front end damage, and Sarah actually. There was a whole sort of concertina effect into that first big hairpin, and there was a few drivers that did pick up some damage through that, but we're all still going. At least only some front end damage, but only limit the top speed, which although there are 2 big straights here, they're more worried about those twisty turny bits and trying not to end up in the barrier around there. So hopefully not too bad for them, but lots going on in that first lap. There seems to be a big gap between Sarah and Lee down the straight at the moment, as Sarah was recovering from that incident where I think one of the drivers almost stopped right in the middle of the track due to that concertina effect. But out front we can see sort of Koulias down to Lee, basically sort of almost nose to tail. There's a lot of drivers vying for positions here. We've got a mixed grid at the moment with tyres, most opting for the soft tyre out front, which was reflected in the qualifying. We can see Coach on that medium one. I think he's Nigel on the medium and Coach. Both of those drivers look like they're in prime position as Coach takes Murphy for 4th. Both of those drivers in prime position for a good result on strategy alone, looks like at the moment. But Koulias sort of trying to run away at the front, followed by Iceman. Where do we go with this one, Matt? It looks like it's going to have to start settling down now and start looking at strategy once he stops fighting.
Yeah, we saw a bit of a battle there between Murph and Coach, both the Supras heading nose to tail down the straight, and a changed position for Coach getting up into P4. As we see now Phil right on the tail of Murph there. It's going to be the GTR versus the Supra, with Lee following close behind in that Porsche. Lee not getting much change of position. I believe Lee staying in position, so we'll be wanting try and get up in a 6th or 5th soon enough. We'll see if the Porsche driver can hunt down the 2 up in front of him and potentially get past Coach after that. But yeah, things are definitely going to settle down. We saw a bit of action in the sprint, of course, towards the start, even after into the end of the race, and after the first half of the race, there was a good bit of action because people were still trying to swap positions, still trying to get up into the podium. But now the field has definitely thinned out a lot quicker, and we're seeing these gaps forming even on the 3rd lap. There will be a change, difference in tyre compound for some, of course, but not many opting for those different tyres.
I just noticed Coach, he set a purple sector. I think it was a 32.2 or 32.3 in sector 1 on the medium tyres, and that is rapid. So Coach is going to be the one to watch from my eye in that Supra, as we know it is very quick at the moment. He's making the best use of it. He hasn't had the strongest start to the season, but he seems to be coming good now with multiple podiums in recent races, and still running obviously P4, but Koulias out front trying to stretch away from the back. It's hard to gauge at the moment. From that qualifying, it was only 1/10 covering the top 3. Obviously we have had a slight change of position from some of the soft runners there, but Koulias and Iceman trying to run away at the moment, followed by Nigel and Coach. So, but as we see, battles coming into that hairpin. Murph with the rear end damage, which I think he picked up in this corner on lap 1, trying to fend off from T50 Phil and Lee. So Lee poised to try and make a position up, but Sarah looks like she's closed the gap to Lee as well. So these battles, although settling down, are forming new ones, Mac.
Yeah, as Lee is just in that slipstream of the GTR and is going to pull out here in a second to try and make a move. Or will he? It looks like backing off a small bit there. That's an interesting strategy. It definitely looked like Lee had a bit of overspeed. But Lee leaving off the throttle to just stay behind the GTR driver. Not sure, maybe doing a bit of tyre conservation or fuel conservation or something there. And just not taking that opportunity as of now. Murph will put a gap there now ahead of Phil. We saw them fighting into turn 1, but Phil managed to get that, Phil not getting the best of exits, and Murph managing to get a good exit out of that first harsh braking zone. As we just look further back now, we got Sarah in P8, of course, which will be trailing that battle that's brewing between Lee and Phil, so might be able to pick up a few positions herself if there is anything that goes on with that. So Sitterly kicking up a bit of grass there, coming out of the final corner, trying to hunt down Bertie in the Mclaren. You see the drivers all setting personal bests on this lap pretty much. The speed definitely picking up as the battles kind of tend to die down and there's more just getting into race pace and focusing on the race at hand rather than fighting on the drivers. But we might see a fight here again with Lee and Phil, as Lee's in that slipstream. Will he opt to take the move this time, or will we see him lift off? Let's see now. You see, not as close as he was before, so not sure if he launched a move down the inside here, which no, we'll keep patient, the Porsche driver, and we'll wait for another lap most likely. As you see now as well, Phil is managing to catch up to the Supra of Murph again, as we were just heading through that S's section, so maybe Murph might be struggling a small bit, as Murph does have that rear end damage, of course, so that will be hindering the straight line speed of that Supra, potentially the kind of exiting speed as well, as we know that the rear end damage on any car will of course affect the straight line speed and will make it a lot more tail happy into those corners. We see Murph bending off from a move there against Phil.
It's worth said, I'm just going to raise a point about Lee. He's never been particularly at home with the feature races, but it looks like he is choosing his battles here today, not choosing to overtake on a few points, maybe choosing to save a bit of fuel in the slipstream and going for the long games. That could be a much welcomed, not going to say improvement, but much welcomed change of strategy, which can definitely pay dividends around a track like this. You play the long game around here, because you can go for that pass, but you can easily then get repassed down the back straight, whereas you could have just saved the fuel in the first place. But we can see Phil thinking about that pass because Murph is carrying that damage. He's going to want to get past and utilise those soft tyres, which they are both running. And try and... Yeah, there we go. Phil making the pass into P5. But Phil's going to want to make the most of those soft tyres in particular, Mac. But that is Murph down to P6. He's now going to potentially be at the mercy of Lee and Sarah soon. But we have seen Sisley, he's got up to P9. Bertie is running P10. And somewhere, Gary, I think he's had an incident. Because he is, I think, suffering in P11. And unfortunately, it does run a little bit wide. Bad timing there for us joining Gary. But hopefully enjoying his first race here with Nighthawk Racing. Coolio still in the lead at the moment with just slightly better tyre wear than Iceman, who is still holding that P2. But those soft tyre runners are going to start thinking they're going to want to get off those soft tyres and onto a set of mediums and undercut the drivers behind them. But at the moment, Nigel and Coach look like they've settled down into a really good rhythm, and they will be the net leaders of this race once the top two pit. So any insights that you can think of, Matt? What would you be thinking at the moment if you were, say, like a driver like Murphy who's carrying that damage on the soft tyres? Just get the stint over and done with, and then change to the mediums, and then focus on that middle stint.
Yeah, well, interesting, because I thought, you know, especially if you're on a softer compounded tyre, you might be able to kind of risk that early pit stop to fix that damage. Because of course, if you were on the hard tyres, let's say, that would be probably worst case scenario, getting damage in the first few laps of your stint and then having to ride that out for the entire hard tyre stint. So as you mentioned, that shorter soft tyre stint that he will have will definitely help with getting that damage repaired quicker. Probably just not wanting to lose track position and thinking the Supra, of course we've seen the Supra has been extremely strong around both configurations of this track. So I think maybe taking that bit of extra speed that it's kind of historically had and just saying, okay, we might be able to nullify a small bit of this disadvantage with that faster cars. We see Iceman entering the pits very early, but we also see Murph heading in as well. So Murph will be able to fix that damage. Just a bit interesting to see both of those drivers pitting, because of course we know that you can run these tires down to maybe about 20%, and it doesn't look like those drivers have ran them down that much. So interesting move there. Just want to raise an interesting point as well that you mentioned earlier about Lee in the Porsche. We do know historically that car is horrible on fuel consumption compared to some of the other cars in the field. So could be saving a bit of fuel there, but also as well we've seen a classic moment, I think, where we saw a driver in the sprint race run out of fuel just on the line and end up losing the win of the sprint race in the Porsche. Yep. Which is just an interesting point that you mentioned, because that fuel consumption is not the best.
Yeah, that was season 1 or season 2 Deep Forest around here, our first experience around here. And yeah, that can lead to some frayed tempers and certain moments where you're like, oh, I ran out of fuel. But it's one of those things that's, you've got to play the cards you're dealt, haven't you? So hopefully we don't see any more running out of fuel today. But like you say, that strategy-wise, Iceman, and I think Iceman's come in probably a tad early. He had a lot of life left on those tyres. Coolio still has some life left in those NSX tyres at the front on the softs. Murphy we can understand because he had that damage. Maybe he just wanted to get rid of that damage and go to the mediums, like Sarah is doing as well, but a lap later. Bit of an interesting call on strategy there, Mac. It's one that will play out in the coming laps, but I'm going to have to say, keep an eye on Koulios, because particularly, it's not a driver skill thing, but when that NSX comes down on that rear tyre, when it gets low, like you would know with the 458, it suddenly becomes a very difficult car.
Definitely, the rear tyres on some of those cars, especially the ones that might have bit ill handling, once the tires wear down, it gets very difficult to drive them, and you have a very easy spin into the corners. I know from experience that final corner can be very difficult on worn tires, because it's kind of a mid-speed corner. You're carrying a bit of speed into there and you're braking. It is a 180-degree hairpin, so like you're trying to keep that car pointing in the right direction throughout that entire loop, and it's once you've got those worn tires, it becomes very difficult and trying to accelerate on that exit. So he'll have to play that just correct so that the tire is as most worn as it can be, but he'll have enough life to make it all the way around the course. As we see now, he does come into the pits, maybe one lap earlier than I would have expected, but we've seen a lot of drivers. Okay, you can see there the rear left is quite worn, so yeah, probably a good idea to come in this. I've seen other drivers have better tires at this stage in the race.
Just having a look as well, Iceman, who pitted from P2, took on a full tank of fuel. Murph fixed his damage, but didn't take on that much fuel, so unfortunately it looks like Murph has gone backwards a little bit, considering Iceman's going to go a lot longer on this stint. But like you say, Koulios pitting, get rid of those soft tyres, now going to come out on fresh mediums. How far in front of Iceman? A good couple of seconds, but Murph making his way, using that superpower into turn 2, round the outside and down into turn 3 or turn 5, depending on GT7 we want to call it. But it looks like Murph has got that move down the back straight, and that superpower will hopefully, for him, keep him ahead of Iceman, but he's going to have to be aware and watch out for the drafting, the slipstream back pass down into that tight right-hander. Well, what else can we say? Bertie is running solidly as well on those medium tyres. Looks like his tyres are barely even worn. Half a tank to go. Could he be thinking a one-stopper around here, Mac?
I mean, you know yourself as a 650S driver, Midnight, the McLaren is probably one of the best cars in this game for fuel and tyre conservation. So I'd say maybe it's on the cards, but you can see with that fuel tank, he's got about 50% left, and he's just going to be going past the line now to start the 11th lap. So if you think about it with the maths, that's 20 laps of fuel you can get on one tank. So he might just be short 6 laps by the end of this race if he was to keep the current fuel consumption that he has now. So, I mean, there might have to be some extreme fuel saving to do a one-stopper, but I'd say if you're short shifting and you put it in a lower fuel mode, I'd say it could be entirely possible.
We'll have to wait and see what he does. I'm just watching to see what happens when Lee comes out of the pits. Is he going to take a full tank? Because Sarah was right on the back of him before the pit stops. I think Sarah has undercut him. It's actually going to be very close into the right-hander. Nope, Sarah has got ahead, just about a second ahead. So that undercut working nicely, but Lee with the full tank. We'll see how that one plays out going forwards. Up at the front, Nigel has taken the lead with Iceman and Koulios pitting, but half a tank still in that Ferrari, followed by Coach, who will definitely be getting a lot of our attention here tonight. But now it's settling down. Sisley on those medium tyres still. Looks like he's suffering with a bit more tyre wear than the two in front, but such will happen in certain cars. But that Lexus RCF very good on fuel, and like you say with that McLaren, it's entirely possible for Bertie to put that in a window with a little bit of fuel saving and a little bit of know-how with the tyre conservation to get it. So maybe even lap 23. I mean, it's going to be a tall ask. We'll have to see what he goes to. Maybe he will go for a one-stop, maybe he won't. But at the moment, he's got Koulios for company right behind him. And those two having a little bit of an incident in the sprint race are going to want to not repeat that. Otherwise, at the moment,
I'd say definitely Bertie has. Sorry, Bertie definitely has tyre wear closer to the expected out of any of the drivers on the medium tyres. You can see the tyres usually get on the mediums, they'll usually get about 21-22 laps in ideal conditions on a full tank of fuel. So I'd say he's probably on track to do that, as close out of any of the drivers to do that. That are currently on that medium tyre, but we'll have to see those who have now come out in the mediums if they can replicate the same, or if they're going to have a bit more tyre wear. Of course, McLaren, as I mentioned, very good on its tyres and its fuel.
Quite right. I think the question now comes down to is when are the two leaders going to be, and what tyres are they going to go to? The one factor that they have to do is they will have to use 2 different compounds of tyres. You can't run mediums all the way to the end. You've got to use a combination of medium softs and or hards. So at the moment it does look like Nigel and Coach are going to try and put the car roughly into the 18, 19, 20 lap mark, which will put them nicely on for a double medium run and softs in whatever order. most of the other drivers have used a combination of softs and mediums already. As we do see a potential pass from Koulias on Bertie. Bertie still hasn't pitted. Little tag on the back there. But they both got away with it. But Bertie a little bit narrow. Koulias thinking of going around the outside, or at least opening up the corner. There he goes, cut back. And the NSX under the traction with those new, fresh medium tyres. Gets the traction out of the corner, and Bertie will get a nice helping of slipstream. Maybe think about coming back at Koulias on this one, or just like a nice helping of free slipstream and fuel conservation back. But we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Sicily still running in P3, only just ahead of these two. Koulias lighting up those rear tyres
again. Of course,
again.
I think Sicily still has to make a pit stop, so these guys will, of course, be ahead once that happens. So Koulias, of course, is the net race leader because Nigel, Coach, and Sicily are both on the alternate tyre strategy. So that was the pass for the net race leader. Of course, Bertie is, of course, on that alternate strategy as well. But we'll have to see now how this race plays out as Koulias picking up a bit of grass there, getting a bit of oversteer, you can see dust being kicked up. So we'll have to see now how this plays out, because those medium tyre runners will of course start getting overtaken by Koulias, but we'll have to see where that puts them when they do make their first pit stop of the race. And just to correct myself as well, that was not the pass for the net race lead, because Bertie of course is on a different strategy, so Koulias would have been in the lead whether he passed him or not anyways. But we see here, Iceman has gotten front left damage somewhere. I don't know where that's happened, but he's gotten it. So that is going to definitely be a struggle for the Genesis driver, who is currently under pressure from Murph in the Supra, who also has damage. So maybe an instant that we've missed between these two, or just completely separate instance, we don't know. But we'll have to see once the stewards look at the race after its completion. But these players now will be, of course, around the same pace because of the similar damage, but they might get caught up to by Phil behind because they're going to have that pace disadvantage.
Yeah, that is unfortunate for those pair. At the end of the day, damage around here, it's not as limiting as it is on some tracks, but it's still going to slow you up. It's going to make you have to adjust your driving style at absolute best. But the one thing I can say, at least Murph, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword in this one. He's got less fuel, so he's going to be coming in the pits sooner, as we do see Sicily coming into the pits. But Murph will be pitting sooner. I think he is on an aggressive free stop from the looks of the fuel. So at least he's going to spend less time on that with that damage, as we do see Sicily taking in the new fresh pair of boots and get ready to go back out. But yeah, damage around here, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's still not what you want. But these two drivers are having good clean racing between them, and it does look like Murphy's thinking about the pass. Iceman covering it off, and we're not seeing any horrible lunges today, which is quite nice. We are seeing some good undercuts. Murph really placed his car beautifully there, but can that Genesis out-drag the Supra? But they are bringing with them T50 Phil, who's in his second Nighthawk Racing race, so he's going to be wanting to join this party in this battle. All down to the right-hander. Murph looks like he's got the move done, never give up, but he might have to give up this one. But they're going to go side by side for the tight right-hander. This one's going to be ambitious from you lads. Oh, well done. But you are seeing both drivers using all of the track and just a little bit more as well. But we now have Phil for company, so what would you do at this point, Mac? Iceman picks up a half-second penalty. If you were Phil, would you be waiting, letting these guys fight it out and picking your moment, or just try and get past them as quickly as possible?
I mean, now with the 5-10 penalty that Iceman got, I might as well wait around, because Iceman's going to have to slow up at some point. Might do a bit of a bump draft on the straight if Phil does get back to the back of him, or just overtake him before that, doesn't matter. But as long as Iceman doesn't hold him up into the corner, that's all that really matters for Phil in his chase to Murph in the Supra up ahead. So you can see here he's getting a lovely slipstream, but if he's to kind of hinder him into this corner, then it's not going to be much good for Phil getting that slipstream. You can see Iceman going defensive, so that's going to take a bit of time from the GTR driver. Now Iceman's going to have to slow up to serve that 5-10 penalty just off the racing line. That leaves Phil now ahead, but with no help from the Genesis driver, so it means that Murph has sailed out up ahead while the two of those were kind of duking it out.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. But just behind Iceman in 8th, we do have Sarah, who is just quietly getting on with the race, trying to keep out of any incidents, unfortunately getting tangled up in that first lap incident, followed by Lee. These two running a lot higher earlier in the race, but that said, some drivers still haven't pitted, so it's all still to shake out a little bit. And I do wonder when we're going to start seeing the leading pair come in for their pit stop. It can only be a couple of laps away, and that 458 of Nigel Mansdale, I do love that name and I will continuously tell you that, it does look like that rear left tyre is starting to hurt, and Coach is starting to close in on him, particularly in that Supra, which looks like it's got much better tyre wear at this moment in time and fuel economy, so we might be seeing Nigel go a little bit backwards towards the halfway point in this race, but so far holding on to P1. But like we have said, Koulias in the net lead, but on that completely opposing strategy. Next, Coach looks like he is starting to zero in. This is going to start becoming interesting for the American driver. It obviously lit up the rear tyres and put a bit more of a heat cycle into those rear tyres. Not what we wanted to do at that point. But we can't be too long before we see that Ferrari in the pits, mate.
It looks like Phil and Murph are currently fighting side by side. We head down the back straight and into this right-hander now. We see Phil just not managing to get by. He did go on the inside for the first harsh braking zone of the track, but Murph managing to get that exit and somehow managing to keep ahead on the straight, even with that front-end damage, and still not able to get the position. Phil going into the right-hander, and then of course the SS section breaking up that flow. But an interesting move, or a move attempt by Phil, just not working out in the end. And just to point out as well, Coach was catching up to Nigel. As you mentioned, Nigel struggling with that tyre wear and trying to save a bit of fuel as well. And Coach has been catching for the last few laps. But of course, they are going to be pitting soon enough. So even if position change does happen, most likely won't really matter, because they will have to come into the pit within the next lap or so.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We are seeing Coach with the highest speed at the moment, but on that last lap it does look like Coach had a little bit more of an somewhat minor incident somewhere, because he lost 7 or 8 tenths to Nigel. But yeah, we think that's more than likely a changing flow of the race, and Nigel is starting to suffer with that tyre wear. But good battle between Murph and Phil at the moment. Murph holding off Phil despite that damage. That is quite impressive from Murph in his second Nighthawk Racing race. So lots still going on. It's not settled down properly, but we do see Nigel pitting at that 18 lap mark. Might be optimum for him, so that could be 18 laps twice on the mediums with a 10 at the end, perhaps on the softs. Depends on what he goes to now. But this is where we see Koulias. He's going to pick up another place back into P2. What will be our net race leader, but that fight between Murph and Phil still going on. Well, Matt, can you call who's going to finish at what position at any position yet? As far as I'm concerned, it's still wide open. We do see a little bit of contact between Murph and Phil into that right-hand corner. Phil just about getting down the inside, but I think Murph might come back at him. That super straight line speed is unmatched around here today.
Yeah, I don't think you can call any position, really. I think the only position I'm calling is my current 90-degree angle in my chair while watching this enthralling race, and my seating position, because I am gripping the armrest so much because there's so much shit happening on the track. As we see now Murph and Phil going side by side into the turn 5 section, and it looks like Murph is still staying ahead of the GTR driver, managing to do really well. But of course he does have a lot less fuel, so he is carrying a lot less weight, so it's going to help him in the twisty sections and acceleration on the straights. Iceman is catching up behind. Just shows how much these guys are battling, because he's managed to catch up even with that front end damage, and after looming in the back so long. He's catching time as Coach enters the pits now in the Supra on those medium tires. We'll be getting a fresh pair of tires and getting some fuel into that car to take him until his next pit stop.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Coach is going to be happy to get rid of those tyres. Phil down the inside into the final corner again. Can only imagine Murph's going to want to come into the pits in this one, so he's cut back under and yep, goes to the pits. Iceman following him. That's interesting. Is Iceman just copying his strategy, perhaps? That's an interesting one. It's not one I expected. Coach will be coming out into what will be effectively a net P2 because he's going to be, I think, probably well ahead. Where's Nigel? No, he's coming out behind Nigel. That's interesting. The undercut for Nigel has kept him out in front of Coach. Didn't see that one coming, but it does promote Sir Hawkeye up into P6, Lee into P7. But that, I'm surprised by Iceman. Is he getting his soft tyre stint out of the way? Wait for him to come out of the pits. Nope, he's still running the medium tyres, so that's a strange one from Iceman. So he was running very, very high, but I have to figure out what is happening there. Bertie picking up a 1 second penalty somewhere in the track, but he's not going to make it to half distance, even in the McLaren. He's going to definitely have to do a 2-stop unless he's going to have to go super conservative in the final part of the race, but I don't see him attempting that one. But lots of interesting, the best way to put it is lots of varying strategies around here today, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. As we see Birdie entering the pits now, 1% fuel, taking off those medium tires. So once he's pitted now, we will see Koulias in first and Phil in second position. Phil will need to pit, of course, so will lead to having Nigel in P2 and Coach in P4. Sorry, P3, sorry. But yeah, there's a lot of different strategies. I don't understand why Iceman pitted for medium tires again. It could be because of the damage. Could have been fixing damage on the car, maybe. Was feeling it was hurting the car's performance too much. I mean, we do know the Supra that Murph is driving, when he had damage, it still had a lot of pace in it. So maybe the Genesis just not really sharing that same outlook, not having the same kind of pace deficit as the Supra was not having. So I don't know, that might be one of the reasons. As we see Gary in the pits coming off the hard tires, which is interesting. Only driver I've seen running hards this race. We'll have to see what tire they go on to, whether it would be a pair of mediums. Most likely I'd say a pair of mediums, because it means then that they can maybe get us to the end of the race. As I said, it will be difficult to get a full tank of fuel to the end of the race. Not really tires. Tires should be fine. We see what he'll come out on. It'll come out on medium tires. So we'll see. This will be one to watch, whether Gary can carry this GTR to the end of the race with that fuel.
But he has gone a lap down, sadly.
There on track.
I say he has gone a lap down.
But it'll be interesting.
Yeah, you won't be focusing on that, at least. He'll focus on his own strategy, mate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, just for the other drivers to see, like, what the hard tire to medium tire stint would be like if they were to take it. It'll be interesting data for not only him, but the other drivers as well, to see just how that hard tire performed around here, and to see if they could potentially have made it a one-stop, and whether it was actually quicker or not in this race.
Oh, I guess we'll find out. We have noticed that Murph has gone to the hard tyre as well. But we, again, like Iceman, like you pointed out, maybe they're both trying different strategies to work around that damage they were both carrying and see where it goes. But at the moment, we do have Nigel, who is making his way back up the field. Now has created a gap to Coach with that undercut, and Coach seemingly losing a bit more time in the pits. But now Nigel looks like he's going to be making a move for Phil. He's going to want to put a car between him and Coach straight away. But I have to say, at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of impressive drives, particularly from Koulias at the moment, who did go on that soft tyre opening stint strategy, followed by the mediums, who has just been, I think, so far faultless, which is great to see in his new special livery for this race. But we might be able to see Nigel going for that pass down into turn 1 to 3. See what he does.
Yeah, heading downhill, and then into this sharp slope that goes uphill as we head into turn 5 now. Ferrari driver not managing to take that inside line because Phil covers it off. But Nigel will have this acceleration. That Ferrari is one of the best cars around here. Coming out of that first turn, you see there Phil signaling with the indicator, going to go to the right hand side. And Nigel just not having that pace advantage, managed to pull up alongside him, but will have the braking power to go down the inside, late braking from the Ferrari 458 driver to get ahead into the bridge section. We head now through this twisty, windy part of the track. Lots of fast left and right coming up. Very easy to get it wrong, head into the wall, get a bit damaged.
And you can't...
Very narrow track, of course. I'd like to say it's probably closest we'll get to Monaco in this game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I really would. And you can see from our second view as well that Coach was getting all so close whilst that battle was going on as well. So you have to beware. If you're attacking someone in front, you either make the move and get past them quick, or you're going to have the person behind you right on the tail. Now, I'm starting to think, I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think a lot of drivers are going to be starting to think, if they haven't already, about their final stop. So we've got drivers like Koulias out front, who's going to be thinking he's probably going to go mediums or hards to the end. He's going to be entering that zone. We could think about going to the end, but at the moment, these drivers, they definitely have another stop to go. Phil will be in the same zone as Koulias, who's on the same similar strategy. But the two drivers either side of him are on the alternate opposite strategy with fresh medium tyres at the moment and still yet to use the soft. So Phil knows that his battle might not be with the drivers immediately surrounding him at the moment. He's the, as Sarah would say, the meat in the sandwich at the moment. At that moment, it makes you a little bit uneasy because you know these cars around you, they've got much fresher tyres, are a lot quicker at this moment. Matt, what do you do at this point? You've got two options as far as I can see. Do you fight and hold them up and hope to fight them later in the stint? Or do you focus on your own race and then just maximise your own potential? It's two schools of thought there which are very much juxtaposition to each other. Hard to say that one.
Well, first of all, I'd be hoping that Koulias would be thinking about his strategy because he's going to have to come in this lap. He's got not a lot of fuel left in that NSX, so he will 100% be thinking about that final stop. And you'll have to wonder, will he be able to take that as a final stop with 22 laps to go in this race? I mean, I said already, Bertie would have a challenge getting 25 laps in at McLaren, and he, of course, hasn't went for that strategy. He's on the softs right now, so that's not going to last 25 laps. But will Koulias be able to bring it home with 22 laps on the NSX, which is very heavy on those rear tyres? We'll have to see. But about what you were saying before, I mentioned that about focusing on your own race or focusing on the drivers around you. Well, when you're on an alternate strategy, anybody, of course, you'd love to fight for that position, and you can to some extent. Like, for example, you've somebody behind that's on a different strategy, that's on a different tyre. If you're on the mediums and they're on the softs, good if you can hold them behind, because that means that their soft stint would be slower than your soft stint, which would mean that you'd have a net gain of time. But at the same time, you want to be careful, because if you're wearing your own tires, if you're taking up too much fuel by yourself, or you're consuming too much fuel by yourself while trying to fight off this driver, then there's no point. You see Koulias heading into the pits off the medium tires, 1% fuel, so that's going to be interesting. What tire is he going to take? I'm not sure. Was he on the? Did he start on the? He started on the soft, right?
He did.
That means doesn't have to take any other tire. He can go on the mediums again if he wants. He can go on the hards, he can go on the soft. He can do whatever he wants. So I'd say probably the mediums, because he'll have 22 laps. I'd say the mediums will get 22 laps if he conserves them properly. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on the hards just for that safety in mind. But Phil has been overtaken by Coach just there while I was talking about the whole strategy situation. But definitely, if you can do it, fight the drivers around you, have a bit of fun, have a bit of crack. But if you can't, and you want to just focus on your own strategy, if you need to conserve tires or fuel, then definitely do that.
Phil lighting up his tyres, coming out of the hairpin there. and dropping the time to coach there, trying to maximise his own potential, and unfortunately it hasn't worked out. Koulias has gone to those medium tyres, but Matt, do you know what? I think he's going to struggle. I think he only did 16 laps on those medium tyres and then do 20 on a set of medium tyres. It's going to be a bit of a stretch. Could we see him converting to a free-stop strategy with another set of softs to the end? But if that's going to be the case, he's going to have to find a lot of time and a lot of speed somewhere, because the drivers out front only have one more pit stop. He's going to have to either find a hyperspace button or nurse his tyres to the end. Either way, I think he's going to have Nigel and coach breathing down his neck towards the end. So that's put Koulias with that medium stint in a little bit of jeopardy for the win there.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, if we look at his fuel, I think the fuel tells us the story of what Koulias is planning, because we've seen the driver who's most efficient on fuel this race is Bertie, and he got 20 laps on a full tank of fuel. Koulias does not have a full tank of fuel right now. He came out on 90%. So I think he is going to take that soft, he's going to elect that soft stint at the very end of the race and come in again, because I'm not sure how fuel efficient the NSX is, but I do not think it's going to be able to cut 10% and still make it 22 laps. I don't think that's possible. So I think we'll definitely see Koulias in again at the end of the race, as we see Lee come in off the medium tyres, 5% fuel. I'd say maybe for him, he'll have 19 laps to go to the end of the race. I think completely possible that he can make it to the end of the race on a set of mediums.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to agree with you on there. It's going to be an entertaining one at very least to the end. Lee could very well go to the end, but I've got to say, so far, I'm gripping the chair like you described earlier on. I think this is going to start getting really quite tense. You do see Coach, who looks like he's got the better overall strategy and pace. However, Nigel has managed to stay ahead of him so far at lap 27 all the way through this race. So it's going to come down to that final stint and see, hopefully, Nigel go to the soft tyre and race Coach directly in that final stint. But Phil, so far, having an impressive race, running P3, but he's going to be thinking now, here we go, yep, here he comes in for, I believe, what will be his final stop on medium tyres to the end. And Sarah running currently P4, maybe promoted to P3 if she stays out for another lap. Nope, there she goes, into the pits. That's going to promote Koulias effectively up to P3, who's going to be in the... Do you know, I don't know if we can say net lead anymore. Like you say, I don't think you can go the whole race, the whole remainder of the race, on that tank of fuel. So, net lead, I think it is actually Nigel who is effectively in the prime position for the win here, although Coach breathing down his neck. Koulias is going to have to go some to get, one way or other, make that car last to the end or find the extra pace on a set of soft tyres somewhere. But Knight descending here at Deep Forest reverse. We do have Sicily running in P4. Iceman with that damage repaired running in P5. We have his friend who was Murph nowhere near at the moment. But Bertie, who is running those soft tyres, getting his soft tyre stint out of the way in the middle, which is counter to most of the drives that we've seen today. But counter doesn't necessarily mean worse, it means different. But then again, different, in Phil's case, means running the hard tyre. Is he going to have enough pace on there to sort of recover his way back up the track? It's interesting to see that we have wildly different strategies playing out here today.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've mentioned in many commentaries before, I used to be a big advocate for the hard tyre, and then it got kind of nerfed, and then I had to learn the hard way in multiple races that no, I am in fact not built different enough for the hard tyres. But in certain situations and in certain racetracks, the hard tyres are absolutely the way to go. Whether that will work out for Phil, we'll have to see. But that's exactly why he's gone for those hard tyres. Because of course, who did we see on the hard tyres earlier? We saw Gary on the hard tyres earlier. But we have some sort of, you know, yeah, Murph as well was on the hard tyres, is on the hard tyres now as well. But could Murph and Phil have seen Gary and been like, okay, we've seen the hard tyres, we've seen how they performed, maybe we'll go try them ourselves? Or as well, just saying, I don't think the mediums are going to have the outrace pace, because obviously the tires wear different rates on different cars. They might have been confident enough with staying on the medium tires for that much time. You know, unfortunately, we can't read the drivers' minds, but I'm sure the drivers know what they're doing, and I'm sure they have something up their sleeve, and they know it's all going to play out. As we see, Coach is getting very close to Nigel here. Coming out of this final corner, could there be an overtake onto the straight and potentially into turn 5?
Entirely possible. He's in that slipstream. At very least, going to be a nice helping of free top speed here, and he's going to be in. Yeah, he's definitely in that draft zone. That's going to start to become very close and tight into turn 2. Coach keeping to the left-hand side, opening up the corner for him. That's forced Nigel narrow in the corner, but he does get that 458 rotated and off down the straight. So now is the time where Coach is choosing to deploy a lot of that pace, and that Supra behind is one of the last things you need. We know from the red lobby, the Supra in the right hand is being Coach in this moment, is definitely making it work. Up into P1 he goes, but he's got Nigel directly behind him still. Well, I'm starting to wonder, was that maybe a little bit of a tactical decision from Nigel? It looked like he didn't fight that too hard. So I'm wondering if he's realised he has to either settle for P2 right now, or he's just wanting to save a bit of fuel and change his strategy for the final sector of the race. Because he'll know, like you say, you're playing the guy across from you. It's a bit like Texas Hold'em strategy in the GT7. You have to play everyone around you and then play the card, which in this case might be the strategy card. He's thinking, I need to save some fuel, use Coach as a way to save a bit of fuel.
Yeah, well, as well, there's the strategy of, hey, you can get past me here, but I'll get back past you in the next corner, because it looks like Nigel might be very close to Coach. We know the 458 has good exits out of that turn, that hairpin. So could it be Nigel saying, okay, I'll give you the position here, but I'd like it back on the next lap? Doesn't look like it's worked out so far, but we did see Nigel was able to follow Coach very close through that sector 2. Very hard to follow in there, lots of dirty air, and of course it's quite a twisty section.
Oh.
You see Nigel's just not close enough. Right now it's always a bit late braking, and has he gone up there? No, he hasn't. He's managed to keep it on the track. That so looked like he was going to go straight on into the Aramco for a second, but maybe just braking a bit too late, a bit too close for comfort there, and losing a bit of time. But he is catching back up, slowly but surely. I'd say maybe Nigel might have a chance, if he stays in that slipstream, might have a chance at a move again later on in this race. We'll have to see how it plays out.
I do wonder if we're going to see Nigel undercut Coach again and end up back in the lead after the final stop. But like you said there, that's the first time he's had slipstream for many a lap around here, and I think it maybe caught him out down into that tight right-hander. But staying out of the barrier, because that would have been not race ending, but that would have been fight for victory over right there and then. But it looks like Coach is now, he's deploying full speed and going for it now. So it looks like for the moment the battle is over. I don't think it's over for the race. Coolio's still running in P3. It's going to be interesting to see where this all shakes out with the final stops. Still thinking Koulios might have to pit again though. But the battle in the mid-pack, there's still a bunch of cars all together. Sicily fighting with Iceman still. Iceman actually now coming in the pits. Perfect timing. But Bertie on those soft tyres, he can surely only go one more lap on those softs, and he'll be thinking nice set of mediums to the end. But Iceman almost out of fuel. That was well timed from the for the American driver there. But that's going to promote Phil on those hard tyres, who's surely going to the end, back up to P6. But looking at all the drivers around at the moment, it looks like Murph has Sarah Hawkey for company, but Murph is definitely going to have to stop again as well. And Lee just behind Sarah. Those two have been close all race, within a few seconds of each other. But Lee does have the new starting driver of Gary for company as well. But it looks like Nigel is actually somewhere in the mid-sector, caught back up to Coach. That was around the second gap, and that's a lot less now. So maybe that fight isn't over yet, Mac. We'll have to wait and see how all filters round. I do expect the final stops for these two to be around the lap 35 to 37 mark, which they've both still got lots of tyre life left. It's going to be who can jump to that soft tyre and get the most speed. Oh, an undercut as Nigel nearly cut through the Supra there. But who can jump to the fast tyre right at the end and get the most maximum life out of it?
Trust me, there are two cars you don't want to have in front of you while you're driving a 458. It's a Supra or a 4GT. Those things, no matter how much good acceleration you have in that 458, you cannot catch them on the straight as Nigel dives down the inside there, goes a bit wide, and Coach just saying, no bother, I'll get you back on the corner exit. And Nigel going for a bit of a desperate move there, trying to get ahead of the Super driver and losing even more time now. It was an ambitious move, but just a bit too over the top, as he had to really slam on the brakes there to get that car stopped. But as I was mentioning, it's very difficult to try and get the upper hand on a Supra or a 4GT in the straight line. And I can tell Nigel's definitely struggling with that on the straights, but through those corners, through that sector 2, he's gaining a lot of time, and that is definitely down to that Ferrari 458. It's a very loose car, but it can be very good in the right hands, and we're seeing that now with Nigel. And also, I'd just like to point out, an absolute testament to what we mentioned earlier. Me and you mentioned in the commentary already, that McLaren has insane fuel and tyre conservation. Koulias at the start of the race got 10 laps on the soft tyres. Bertie, he's doing 13 laps. That is a really good stint from the McLaren drivers. Nigel sending another move down the inside, but it's just too much again, and Coach getting him back on the corner exit. And he's got a 5-10 penalty for that, and that's not going to help him in his chase on the Super driver. But yeah, I mean, Bertie is still out there, and he was still out there, and he was setting some pretty good pace, even on really worn soft tyres. Yeah. So this battle is still going on, and it's going to be hindered by that 5-10 penalty.
Yeah, just a little bit. I was about to say that 5-10 penalty isn't going to hinder him trying to make another move. I mean, this is last of the late breakers from Nigel, but it's all being done in a manner which both drivers are making it right around the corner, giving us great action. As Coach does run very close up on the grass, close to the barrier, and has compromised himself into the final sector. That's going to give Nigel another massive run. And if he gets in front of Coach before that big hairpin in turn 3, it might negate some of that half-second penalty. And this, well, it's just going to keep going, I feel. But like you said, Bertie having a mega stint on those soft tyres. As he comes out, he's going to be coming out roughly next door to these two drivers. So this is going to be entertaining. So Bertie's going to be the lap driver. He's going to come up right next door to these two. That's a place on track I would not want to be. Slots in directly behind them. But what does Nigel do? He goes for it right down the inside. Coach sort of covered it, and then Nigel backed out of it at the right point. Whew. Good driving from those pair. Coach choosing to cover the inside and forcing Nigel to back out of it. That was intuitive driving, but as we may have seen, that's been happening for the last couple of laps, and Coach deciding enough was enough on that one. Good driving from the American driver. Sisley in the pits in P4 for his final stop. 11 laps to go for him. Oof. Where do we go with these two? I can't take my eyes off them now.
I definitely think Nigel is really trying to get that move done, because there's one fact that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's the fuel. Coach has more fuel than Nigel. We know Nigel took a bit less fuel in that pit stop, and that's why he was able to undercut him in the pits. And I think Nigel knows that he's not going to have that advantage this time around, and he knows when he comes out of that pit lane next time, he's still going to be behind that Toyota. And I think he wants to get that position so he can try and negate some of that disadvantage that he's going to have by taking on extra fuel. There's going to be pit stops happening here in the next 1 or 2 laps. Stay with us, get your popcorn. This is about to get really interesting.
I completely agree. And just a little bit further down the pack, we have 5th to, I think it is 7th, yep, sorry, all together in the back straight. Sarah followed by Murph and Lee and Gary all together, but it looks like Gary's still got a bit stop to go, and now Sisley has joined that battle, so he is going to the end, choosing medium tyres, which seems a little bit strange, but at least he's going to have no tyre wear concerns to the end. Iceman going to the end as well, and now definitely Bertie, although running in 11th, He is directly behind the pair of leaders who will be following him through and will unlap himself by the time that they come into the pits for their final stop. I think it's going to be interesting to see where these two filter out anywhere near Koulias. There's a sheer fact has he made his final stop? Although with these two battling, he is only, I'd say, 6 or 7 seconds behind the leading two, which are now, they're losing time to the rest of the pack. They're in the mid-29s when they were in the 27s. So 2 seconds a lap is an awful lot of time to lose to someone who is putting in solid 27s all the way around every single lap. Good consistency there from Koulias. That's one thing we have given them a bit of stick for in the previous seasons. It's that raw consistency. Definitely finding it today, and he's going to perhaps bring himself back into play with these two now, who are trading. Okay, they're back up to the 28s, but they're now trading lap times. But this race is not over yet, even for the win, Mac. But Nigel's going to have to be careful. That 458 reaching critical status on that rear left tyre.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to see. As Koulias, of course, one thing as well, we did say he took 90% fuel, but he has more fuel than these two at the front. So when he does make that pit stop, will there be enough of a gap when they're refueling that he can get back up to the back of this pack? Could Koulias be playing the strategy of all time here at Deep Forest? We'll have to see soon enough. But Coach is getting low on fuel, so is Nigel. And Nigel's going to start struggling with that rear left. Just as you mentioned, you can see about 10% wear on that. He's going to have to be careful because there's been many times that I've seen the Ferrari 458 drivers get caught out on that final corner, just running out of tyre and spinning it straight round. Myself included, unfortunately. But we'll have to see now as they are heading through this little S's section before the final hairpin. It looks like they will have enough tyre life left. Nigel will be pitting this lap. Coach might be able to stay out one more lap. We'll have to see what he does. And we'll see Nigel pulling right into the pits here now. Coach stays out. Interesting choice there. And we'll have to see if Koulias might stay out as well, or if Koulias could pit. Because if Koulias pitted now, could come out on the soft and could have the tyre life left until the end of the race, just like Nigel will when he elects to go on the soft tyres as well.
Yeah, Koulias bringing himself back into play massively with that consistency and this strategy. Is he playing an absolute blinder we did not see coming? Yes, so Coach now staying at that extra lap. Koulias up into P2, at least provisionally. Nigel coming out, and we have unfortunately heard that he did not have access to soft tyres, Max. He's gone to the hard. Is that a bit of an error?
That is an interesting... Yeah, I mean, for context, you have to buy the tyres for the cars when you buy them. I think they come with mediums automatically, I think. It might be hards, I don't remember. But they come with one set of racing tyres automatically, but you got to buy the other ones. So you got to buy the inters, you got to buy the wets, you got to buy softs, hards, whatever. So if you don't buy the tyres, you don't have access to them, you know? So... Bit of a logistical error there from Nigel, potentially just forgetting to buy those extra sets of tyres, and that's going to cost him at the end of the race. He's not going to have that raw soft pace like Coach will and like Koulias will.
Yeah, completely agree, and that is something we've probably near enough all of us seen in previous championships and racing leagues before, that someone come a wet race hasn't bought the wet tyres, and what can you do at that point other than... Well, you can't really, can you? So, yes, that is unfortunate for Nigel. He's still going to have, at very least, a set of new tyres, but he's going to struggle even keeping Koulias behind him on those hards. The delta between the tyres, between the soft, well, which we presume Koulias is still going to come in, but the delta between those tyres is probably 2 seconds a lap. So Nigel's going to have to put his foot down and go for it, because there goes Coach, taking on less fuel. Yeah, you called it. That fuel level difference and Nigel going to the hard tyre has cost Nigel a shot at that win, I feel, there, the Mac, unless anything drastic happens to Coach. But there's still 7 laps to go. He's going to have to keep it on the black stuff, out of those walls, and as we know, even from Red Lobby here last week, you can lose a second position or even a win on the final couple of laps. So coach has to keep the concentration going. And as you all know, Mac, it's so easy to think that you've got a win in the bag and then just drop it. It's too easy to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the normal configuration of this layout, I think I hit the outside wall about 25 times. Absolute miracle that I didn't get damaged. But any one of those times I could have gotten damaged and my race would be over. So, you know, it's very much, you got to keep that concentration, and you just have to focus on your own race. Even if there's people that are behind you, in front of you pitting, you have to just keep confidence. You have to say, I'm staying out, I'm staying on these tires. You got to focus on your own race, keep it on the track, black stuff, not get any penalties, of course, because those penalties, even though they say they're 5/10, they're more like 2 seconds, not 2/10. They're more like 2 seconds when you have to actually serve them. So you just have to. Even it might not seem like much with 10 laps to go, but it might come the end where those 0.2 of a second might be the difference between you getting P1 and P2, or P3, P4, and vice versa.
Quite right. And I'm just looking through the pack at the moment. I think there's a load of battles, or very at least change positions, depending on what happens with any remaining strategy still to come. We're looking at Sarah running, I think, very high, very respectively in P5 at the moment, around a lot of fast drivers. Sicily, who's been a Red Lobby driver for most of the season, so we know he's quick, directly behind, and with Sarah on those wearing medium tires, going to have to go some to keep Sicily behind her. But we know Iceman starting P2 in this race as well, running P7. Not what he would have wanted for the result, but he's always happy to be here, and he's such a pleasure to have around. We hope he's enjoyed it, and you know, you still might even pick up a position 2 yet. Bertie having a better race than he did in the sprint in P8. Lee, I was just watching. He is on the soft tyre now to the end. Hopefully he can get those soft tyres to the end, because that wear is going to be a factor. But he is on those soft tyres, matching the pace of the leader directly in front of him, of Koulios, who we're going to be watching intently, see what he does with strategy. But I think all eyes now, Matt, have got to be Koulios, because there's no way making that fuel to the end. It's got to be soft tyres and a very literal sprint 100% qualifying session to the end, a la Schumacher. I'm going to not tell you what year, because I can't remember, but it was one year that Schumacher did a 4-stopper at Maggiore in France, and then out-strategise the chasing McLaren. So maybe we're seeing a Ross Brawn inspired style strategy, or he's lucked into it. You never really know, do you?
I know the thing Michael Schumacher did not do, and he did not have barely enough fuel to get around the lap. Koulios might just run out of fuel here before he gets to the pit lane. If you look in the bottom left, he's very close. I think he's not going to have enough fuel to get to this final hairpin, and he's not. He's oh wait, no, has he? Never mind, he just lifted there. But I mean, if that is crazy, because that fuel was right at the bottom there, and the fact he hasn't lost time doing that, you can see it's completely gone. I don't know what fuel mode he must have that in, like fuel mode like lean 15 or something, because there was barely anything starting the lap.
Well, good thing for him, he made the pit lane. I mean, Mac, only an idiot would run out of fuel, right, in the feature race. That's never happened before, has it? Not saying anything about Red Lobby, are we?
You need to shut up. You're spoiling the Red Lobby. You can't do that.
Yeah, check out the Red Lobby video on our YouTube, which is the alternate one to this. But Koulios taking on a splash and dash of fuel, coming out directly behind Nigel. So race on for P2. I don't think Koulios is going to have enough time. He's got the pace, but I don't think he's going to have enough time to catch Coach. But he's definitely going to have enough time to catch Nigel. So, Red Lobby aside, Mac, that Blue Lobby delivering here today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Koulios, we were wondering why he was doing like 15 laps ago when he pitted and he wasn't going to have enough fuel to go to the end. But it just shows how things can change over the course of the race, not only to do with strategy, but also with positions and stuff. You asked me about 20 laps ago, like, could you say any of the final positions? And I mean, if you look at the positions 20 laps ago to now, completely different. So it very much just shows the evolution of this race and how the different strategies have paid off for some drivers and just unfortunately disappointed for others. be just right on board now with Koulias, heading through this S's section and into the final hairpin. I have to say, the S's section can be nice when you get it right, but when you don't get it right, it's very easy to hit a wall or go into the grass. It's a tricky one. And we see now riding on the straight. He will have a small bit of slipstream from Nigel, but I don't think any moves will be made this time around. But definitely, I'd say next lap with those soft tires through that second sector with all that grip, will definitely be an opportunity for the NSX driver.
Yeah, and you can see.
You have to say there's a good variety of car manufacturers in the top 8 right now. I think, if I'm correct, I don't think there's any same car in the top 8. We've got a Supra, we've got a Ferrari, we've got a Honda, we've got a Nissan, we've got a we do have 2 McLarens.
Whoa, there we go.
I would say top 7. So as we see Koulias diving down the inside there in the Honda, sliding his way out of the right-hander, managing to get that move done pretty easily, just shows how much grip he has in the yellow and blue NSX.
Yeah, and Koulias with the fastest lap of the race so far in the 25.9. Maybe not going faster this lap due to that overtaking move. But he's not far behind Coach at all, is he? So, do you know what? You know, we were saying 15 laps ago we didn't know where people were going to finish. I mean, 3 laps to go. Koulias is zeroing in on Coach. So, it's not over yet. It really isn't. Nigel, unfortunately, running those hard tyres. Not able to challenge on raw pace, but he's going to be happy to pick up the podium in his first race with us. But yeah, this race is not over, Mac. Can Koulias, on those completely fresh soft tyres, make an inroad to Coach? And that is your distance there. What, 3 seconds, 4 seconds at most? And Coach, he's got 3 laps to hold off. I think it's going to be tight for Koulias, but the race is not over, I feel.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good bit of time to catch up, I won't lie. And that Supra, we've seen the pace it's had around this track. It's just a matter if Coach will make any mistakes, and if Koulias can just push that car to the absolute limit and try to get past, as we see now. Sarah under pressure here from Sitterly behind. You see Sarah with a good bit of tyre wear. You see that front left getting very worn. So that car will be hurting a small bit, but it's going to be the Lexus versus the M6 potentially here as we come into the final laps. You see into turn 5, that lovely hairpin.
Yeah, that tyre wear for Sarah is definitely affecting her at this point. It's going to make turning right particularly quite difficult around here. So at this point, there's no point conceding a place, trying to maximise what you can get out of your race time. You've got to fight for every single moment on track. Try to hold someone behind. 2 laps to go. It's just fight tooth and nail for that final point. But Sitterly, with what looks like a very wide BMW driven by Sarah right now, right in front of him. So Sitterly going to be trying to find a way around. But, looks like there was a little bit of contact on the barrier there. Not quite, no damage from either of these 2 drivers, which is good to see, but this battle looks like it is going to continue right to the end. But just checking in up front at the moment. Coach down at that right hander at the end of the back straight, followed by Koulias, who is closing that gap. Only 1 lap to go after this. So I think Coach is just going to hold on to it. Nigel and P3 in the 458 running well. Phil in a fairly quiet last half of the race after he's gone to those hard tyres, running P4. Those discs glowing in that GTR. Sarah holding on to P5 at the moment. Let's stay with that. Sicily trying to go the long way round, backing off into the braking zone, choosing life. But he's only got 1 more lap after this to get that pass done. So he's going to have to tuck into that slipstream and hope the M6 isn't quite as fast on the straight as he wants it to be. And then you got Iceman, who is running P7 still. Bertie not far behind in P8, followed by Lee on those soft tyres, followed by Murph as well, who's recovering. He's going to be able to recover from that one as well, who is recovering from going wide at that turn 3, followed by Gary in his very, very first Nighthawk Racing race, with, ironically, Coach just behind, starting his final lap, followed by Koulias, who's closed the gap even more, and who has set in the previous couple of laps consecutive laps, only 1/10 away from the fastest lap 3 laps in a row, whereas Coach is losing 6 or 8 tenths to Koulos behind, but maybe he's just managing it to the end. But checking in to see what Sarah and Sitley are getting up to. No, Sarah's still ahead. That front left looking like it's very second hand at the moment. Mac, are you with me?
Yeah, I am indeed.
Thought I'd lost you there for a moment, but this battle going to the end.
Yeah, we'll see now as they downhill before this uphill section. That is the right, left, right on the first sector of the track. Certainly trailing that M6. You can see the headlights peeking out as they head through the corners into this right-hander now. Certainly not managing to make a move, but will he be able to get the exit here? As Coach is now rounding the final corner to go ahead and win the race with Koulias trailing very close behind. The Supra wins the race and won the sprint as well, so that's a double win for the American driver. Koulias comes in the second, with Nigel after that unfortunate mistake in tyres, coming home in P3 in the 458. Phil, a bit behind, so we will follow Sarah and Stirley as we get to the end here, heading through the S's section now. Sarah going a bit wide there into the left-hander, which lets Stirley catch up to the end, to the rear of that M6. A bit of contact as they're side by side, as they're going to go through this very narrow left-hander, and Stirley goes onto the grass. There's a lot of contact. It's a very tight section through here. The M6 just losing out there at the end, and Stirley getting by. Phil's going to cross the line now in P4, as, there's a very close there between Sarah and Sirley as they're going to go right to the line. Sirley's onto the grass, and Sarah's going to take home P5 in the end with Sirley in P6. That was all the way to the last corner. Iceman at the Genesis in P7, and we've got a bit back to Bercy, who's in the McLaren 650S, just fighting off from Lee here at the end, coming out of the final corner to come home in P8. Lee comes home in P9 with Murph following behind in P10. Those three finishing very close. And Gary will come home now in the GTR in P11 to round off the grid for the race here at Deep Forest Reverse, the feature race.
Well, Mark, that was action from minute 1, lap 1, turn 1 actually, right the way to the final corner on lap 46. All drivers making it to the end, no retirements and lots of action. That was, quite frankly, I think one of the best races of the season. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And where do we start? Where do we break this race down? Do we start with the winner, or do we start with that heroic defending action from Sarah into the final sector there against Italy? Where do we go with that, Mac? Where do we go?
Where do we go? That's a good question. And where do we go as well to see who was the driver of the day for these races? Midnight, you're always, and Midnight and Sarah are always the one asking me. So I think I'm going to take charge this time and ask you, Midnight, who do you think is the driver of the day?
Do you know what? I genuinely loathe, one, being the first person to answer this, and two, giving it to the winner. But that said, I think Coach has driven an outstanding race today. Had massively impressive battles with Nigel. But that said, we've got, particularly in the top three, we've got Koulias went for that alternate strategy, nearly made it work. Nigel having a fantastic debut. For me, it has to be Coach, just because of the combined sprint and feature action. But I'm going to say straight off the bat, it is Coach with the driver of the day for me. But you have to give a massive shout out to Koulias, who has definitely improved strategically and consistently on his race pace, particularly here today. And Nigel having a fantastic race as well. So, Coach for me. How about yourself?
I think I'd agree with Coach. I think very good race from him. Of course, the question has to be asked: would it have been as easy of a win if it wasn't for Nigel having no soft tires? Could there be an alternate reality where Nigel and Coach fought to the end? after the pit stop. That's one question in my mind, but it does have to be said that Coach, of course, was the one making the right decisions, and Coach, of course, was the one that bought the soft tires. So I have to say, I have to agree with you. I think Coach has to win driver of the day for me.
Yeah, I think there is no other real choice in for this race, but it's one of those with an asterisk. Some epically good and impressive drives out there as well from the other drivers. I don't think anyone today has had a bad race, and it's one of those that you could say, you know, you could apply to most races, but I haven't seen anyone today do anything silly, come off the road at silly points, pick up too much damage or take anyone out. Everyone has been impressive in their own right, and everyone today finishing on the lead lap, which just shows the consistency and the close nature of the pace here today, despite Coach at one point looked like he was driving away, and then Koulias before that. So all strategy unfolded beautifully here today, and it's worked out well. Anyone who did pick up damage adjusted their strategy accordingly. Sometimes racing is primarily around strategy, it's about reacting to what goes on around you, or sometimes what you do. But all I can say is, to me, Blue Lobby today has been an utter thrill. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, Max, since you asked me one. Who today has given you the most moment where you would excitement, the most exciting moment today?
So I have time to ponder on what you said. I'm gonna answer. I'm gonna divert the question and just talk about real quick. Just talk real quick about what you said about, you know, everyone finishing on the lead lap. I have to say, what's even more impressive about that is the fact that everybody had alternate strategies. It wasn't a case of everybody did the same strategy and everyone finished on the lead lap. Everybody did like different things, and everybody still was very close to each other. Like we saw there at the end, we had a group of 3 drivers that all had completely different strategies that were all within like a second of each other coming to the line, which is just like crazy to think. That just shows how close the pace was today between everybody. But now that I've had time to think about what she said, I think definitely I have to say Nigel put up a really nice challenge against Coach in today's race, especially considering Coach had kind of taken off at the start there. So I have to say he did very well, and the 458 was now very good control of the 458, considering the Supra is probably one of the dominant cars around here, as we've seen in not only Blue Lobby but Red Lobby.
To be fair, Matt, that's exactly where I was going to go with it as well. Nigel having the battle of the ages with Coach into that first hairpin, which is on the reverse one, is the final set of corners. So I think the track has helped deliver us a really epic set of drives, and it was great to see such close racing, even a few controlled dive bombs, which worked out with what I would hopefully was respectful driving between the two, but I'll have to ask them individually afterwards. But yeah, Nigel, to me, winning the excitement award today, which certainly may have to consider being something going forwards. I do want to give a shout out as well to Sarah in this case for that spirited defence in the last lap there against Sicily, and those pair giving us a really good showing to the end. But a little bit of an unsung hero, we had Phil taking P4, who was in the mix of a lot of action all the way through that until that final stint, chose those hard tyres, and just after that stayed in his own little race and went to the end. But what can we say? I think it's been a good set of races here at the Deep Forest in Blue and Red Lobby for both events and both lobbies. But up next, Mac, Trial Mountain, the American double-header, Trial Mountain and Road Atlanta. It's going to be fun to see these drivers go at it there, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, Trial Mountain, I'll be honest, I hadn't really driven Deep Forest reverse before the race that we had in Red Lobby, which you should totally check out the commentary for that as well. But Trial Mountain is one of those, again, I've never really driven it before I've driven it in time trials, but I haven't never really driven it in a race before, so it's kind of a leap into the unknown. So that generates fear, but also excitement. You know, I don't know if I should be worried or happy. So we'll have to see what goes on. Of course, it's a street track mainly. It's in the mountains. It's quite tight. It's like Deep Forest, but I think there's a bit more space on the track. Like, there's that lovely hairpin in the last sector that I think you could fit probably like 3 buses through. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get like 3 or 4 wide going on through there. But it's going to be an interesting race. We'll have to see what strategies go on. I don't know what the tire wear is like there. So honestly, I don't know much of anything about that track, but that's what makes it exciting.
Well, I can give you a heads up. Tyre wear is going to be a really big factor around there. Probably more than it was at Deep Forest for those long left-handers. So the right tyre is going to be taking a lot of punishment. But something for them to have a think about and strategise, but when they get there. So I'm going to say that's going to be it from the commentary team here today at Deep Forest Blue Lobby. Mac, it has been an absolute pleasure to be in the comm box alongside you again. I look forward to it happening later in the season again, and even seeing you on track for some more action. But Mac, it is time to go and see what they had to say in the podium room.
Let's go.
We ran Deep Forest Reverse and I started P3 sporting a new sponsor livery from Castro and Fasudo Racing. My pace was solid, though the hairpin was tricky. The key was actually the kink left leading into it. Early on I got up to P2 behind Sarah and planned to push her to the win. But we ended up side by side and I decided to just race my own race. I took P1 and even snagged the fastest lap. A great result. Feature race. I qualified P7 on mediums, knowing most ahead were on the softs. Got a strong launch. Avoided a hairy T1 incident and found myself in P5. Battled Murph until he ran wide at turn 9, then set my sights on Nigel, who was also on mediums. As the SOT tire runners pitted Nigel and I moved into P1 and P2. I tried stretching my stint by stayed out a lap too long and rejoined in P5. Pushed hard, caught Nigel and finally passed for P1 by lap 30. Final pit stop strategy was crucial. I went a lap longer than Nigel and came out ahead. With 5 laps to go, the leader pitted and I took the win. I want to give a big thanks to Nighthawk Racing for their support of Fasudo Racing. Their encouragement means a lot.
Honestly, I was shocked with how well it all went. I was super nervous before quali, especially as I'd never raced the reverse layout and just done an hour or so practice a day or 2 before. But once I settled into a rhythm and realized I had some competitive pace, I just enjoyed it and the laps flew by. I fluffed the sprint start. Think I was down to last on the first lap, but just kept plugging away and tried to avoid mistakes incidents. It paid off and I made my way to P3 after a great battle with Sarah for the podium spot. At this point I was pretty sure that was just beginner's luck, really. I had an amazing start in the feature race though. The Ferrari is awesome from a grid start and was P3 for turn 1 this time. I had some great battles and good pace on the mediums, and felt like I led a decent chunk of the race, as I think I had a longer initial stint than other drivers. I overcooked a couple of pass attempts on the Supra coach, but kept it clean thankfully. Then came the final stop. I planned to use softs for ultimate pace on the lighter fuel load, but made a schoolboy error of not actually buying them pre-race, so had to use the hard compound for my final stint. This compromised my pace. When the NSX Quilios passed me for second, I couldn't keep up. I also had to do some minor lift coast to fuel save for the last lap. I crossed the line with 0.1 laps fuel remaining, but still in P3. Amazing result for me, though. I am proper chuffed with my NHR F1-RST debut double podium. Way beyond my expectations. Bring on the next round.